As we stop today and open our hearts, we are reminded of the strength of faith and trust in God's perfect time. We all have times of uncertainty when everything appears to be out of hand, when we could feel lost, or when our plans don't work out as intended. In such times, it's tempting to lose hope, hang on to our concerns, and strive to manage every element of our life. But God softly invites us to let go, surrender our hold, and allowing Him to be our guide. He asks us to believe that, per His will, everything will happen in its own time. Faith, as we know, it is not limited to believing when things are simple or when everything is running well. It's about clinging to that conviction even in demanding circumstances or when we fail to see the wider picture. God urges us to trust Him through everything. He works in ways that are beyond our comprehension most of the times. Unlocking that trust and walking the road God has set for us depends on faith. The Bible provides several instances of how God's timing is always exact. Consider Abraham, who yearned for a son promised by God to be realized over years. Abraham had trust even while it seemed unworkable. Though he had no idea when or how, he trusted God's plan, and the promise was realized at the proper moment, in God's perfect timing. From Abraham's account, God is never late. He does not have our time. He is constantly working for our welfare. He knows just when events in our life should occur. Thinking back on these tales makes it very evident that depending on God's timetable calls for patience. A virtue that might be difficult to develop is patience. This is particularly true in a society that prizes quick outcomes. Still, the road of trust demands patience. We are developing, we are being strengthened, and we are becoming ready for the benefits God has in store for us while we wait on the Lord. We are not just waiting in vain. Letting go and depending on God is not a passive act. Placing our confidence in His hands, believing He is in charge, and releasing our need to control every detail is an intentional choice. It's saying, God, I trust You understand what's happening right now even though I might not. I believe You have a plan for me. I give my doubts, concerns, and anxieties to You. There is tranquility when one surrenders. It lets us relax knowing that we won't have to deal with the weight of solving everything. God knows the road. He has already passed before us. We sometimes find ourselves frustrated and overwhelmed trying to manage everything in our life. We overlook the fact that we are not supposed to bear this great weight by ourselves. In Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30, Jesus orders us, "Come to me, all you who are tired and burdened, and I will give you rest. Learn from me and take my yoke upon you. I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my weight is light and my yoke is simple." These lines help us to realize that Jesus is here to bear our responsibilities. He wants us to fight under less weight from fear and concern. He asks us to believe in Him and discover tranquility in His presence. Letting go might be the toughest thing one has to do sometimes. We hang on to our ideas, our aspirations, and our schedules because we think we know what is best. But God has the wider view. He understands our needs even when we do not. Believing in God's timing helps us to let go of our own wants and rely on His knowing of what is best for us. It entails realizing that God's plan is superior than anything we could have dreamed, even if events do not go as planned or as we want. Sometimes we feel trapped, sometimes we wonder if God has abandoned us, and sometimes it appears as if nothing is happening. Actually, however, God is always behind the scenes working. It does not follow that He is not moving in our life just because we cannot see it. He could be getting us ready for something better, something beyond our comprehension right now. These times ask for us to remain calm and to believe that His timing is exact. Remember also that God does not make errors. Everything he does is deliberate and aimed at something. Looking back on our life, we sometimes find that the things we fretted about, those which we believed to be delays or setbacks, were really part of God's perfect design. Though invisible to us, He was orchestrating all things for our benefit. Depending on God also entails being receptive to His direction. Lord, I trust that you know the way, we are saying when we let go and let God lead. It's about giving our own intentions over to His guidance and being receptive. God's will for us may vary sometimes from what we had in mind, though it's always the correct road. He could lead us down one we never would have predicted. God knows what is best for us. He sees the path ahead. We may relax knowing we are on the correct road when we allow Him to lead us. Everyday decisions include this act of letting go. We do not do once and forget about. Every day we have to decide to believe that God's timing is perfect, to give our plans up to Him, and to trust Him. This road of faith calls for endurance, patience, and a strong confidence in God's kindness. Walking with faith will help us to realize the result of believing in God's perfect time. Embracing the idea of letting go and trusting God helps us to allow ourselves to feel the actual calm resulting from following His plan. There is nothing the planet can provide for peace. It is neither dependent on conditions nor something we can produce on our own. As Philippians 4 verse 7 tells us, this peace above all knowledge, knowing that God is in charge, that He is steering our path, and that His plan is developing just as it ought, gives one serenity. One of the most crucial things to keep in mind about God's timing is how often it does not match our expectations. Our society values fast pleasure and shapes us to anticipate quick answers. God, however, operates on another chronology. He sees the beginning and the end, hence His timing is flawless. He knows what is best for us even in cases of non-awareness. This calls for us to see from one of irritation and annoyance another of trust and surrender. God's timing is not sluggish, it is deliberate. We have to remind ourselves of this. When we are in seasons of waiting, we naturally get nervous or worried. Waiting tests our will to have control, hence it may be challenging. Still, our faith is tried and developed in the waiting. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Isaiah 40 verse 31 promises. This chapter reminds us that depending on God is not passive. This is a growing period when God is working in our hearts to equip us for what is ahead. We also expose ourselves to more clearly hearing His voice when we let go and trust God to be our guide. It's easy to drown out what God is trying to convey to us by being so fixated on our own goals and wants. However, we become more in line with His direction when we let go of our will and believe God knows best. One may get this via prayer, from reading the Scriptures, or from the little proddings of the Holy Spirit. God speaks constantly. We just have to be in a state of submission to really hear Him. Trusting God's timetable also depends on realizing that His delays are not rejections. It does not follow that something never will just because it hasn't occurred yet. God could be shielding us from something we cannot see or guiding us towards something more than we could have ever dreamed. Delayed times might easily cause one to feel demoralized or as if God is not listening. But at these times, we have to remember ourselves that God's will always surpasses our own. Often, His delays help us to develop our faith, grow personally, and learn patience. Believing in God's time also entails releasing our desire for continual affirmation or approval from others. Many times, we search the planet for validation that we are headed in the correct direction. We might be comparing our path to others, asking why events are occurring for them instead not for us. But every one of us has a different destiny according to God. Though it may not seem like anybody else's, He is aware of the road we must travel. Trusting in God involves releasing the comparison trap and concentrating only on the road God has prescribed for us. Along with freedom, letting go and depending on God also releases we live in tension and worry when we are always attempting to regulate every element of our life. We strive to forecast every result. We worry about what lies ahead and about the unknown. We may release that load, however, when we believe in God's time and His will. We may let our impulse to regulate pass and instead relax knowing God is in charge. This offers a liberating and energizing independence. It lets us live totally in the moment, free from the weight of future worries. We could remind ourselves of God's constancy when we are uncertain or afraid. Go back over your life and recall the instances God has intervened for you. Think back on the ways He has pasted, shielded, and mentored you. This will inspire you to believe Him with regard for the future. God never has failed you. He never will. His affection for you is constant. His promises are real. Accepting God's timetable also means accepting His grace. We are not flawless. Sometimes we will find it difficult to let go, attempt to take control once again, or question His plan. But God's grace is enough. He is understanding of our shortcomings, gentle with us, and always pulling us back to Him. When we fail, we may look to Him because His grace envelopes us, and He will lead us back to the road of faith and trust. At last, depending on God's timetable means realizing that His ultimate aim is our development in Him. Our character more worries Him than our comfort does. He is helping us to become Christ's image, and this process sometimes calls for us to pass seasons of doubt, waiting, and submission. God is, nevertheless, guiding us, polishing us, and getting us for the completeness of His purpose throughout it all. Ultimately, everyday acts of faith are letting go and believing in God's time. It calls for patience, let down, and a strong conviction in God's kindness. We discover serenity, freedom, and the hope that all will come to pass in His perfect time when we abandon our own control and let God to be our guide. Though we cannot see it, we may relax knowing God is working all things for our benefit and that His plan is much more than anything we could ever conceive. Trust in Him. He is genuine and reliable,